Hey guys, it's Dad. Thanks for joining me for the final part of a 5-part series on World of Warcraft v Final Fantasy XIV. We'll continue with the next set of categories, starting with playing with friends. Now, why play alone when you can play with friends, right? Final Fantasy and Warcraft offer the ability to form communities and tackle the world together. Both games have similar features where the members of the guild or free company increase their community's standing by completing activities, be it quests, dungeons, or raids. Both are meant to bring players into a familiar social environment and get them into group activities. In Warcraft, guilds can give you access to bonuses like faster mount speed and faster hearth, which is what you use to teleport to your chosen home. You can also work as a group to complete challenges, which gives you access to guild rewards like mounts, pets, recipes, and heirlooms. There's also weekly challenges for completing dungeons, raids, and arenas with guild members, which rewards the guild with gold, which members can use for repairs. As you increase your reputation with the guild, your access to these rewards will increase. In FF14, there's much more to leveling the free company and what each level unlocks. Each level brings something new, like unlocking the creation of a company crest or acquisition of land. Just as WoW has guild perks, FF14 has actions that members can enable, like reduced travel rates or increased experience through battle, but that's only 2 from a huge list of unlockable actions. FF14 also offers moments like this in your free company house. It can be a little chaotic at times, but a lot of fun. This one is a pretty small part, but can make a difference to a lot of players. In FF14, the standard party size is 4, in Warcraft it's 5. Why does this matter? Well, that one spot can make a difference in whether someone is sitting on the sidelines. Playing FF14 with friends, we often have too many people, so we split into 2 groups and queue for front lines at the same time, hoping to get into the same match, even if it's against each other. Of course, in Warcraft, there are times when there's more than 5 people and you have no chance of getting into something together by queuing at the same time. I will also add that on the opposite side of things, if you only have 3 or 4 people, the 4-person party size is perfect because you have less or no random players running with you. Or is it just me that prefers that? Factions are unique to Warcraft. The game will always include the standing of the 2 factions. Sometimes they work together, like when they tried to join forces to fight the Burning Legion, but that didn't go so well. Usually they just fight each other, and that's a huge component of the game. If you're on a PvP server or have war mode enabled, your questing could be interrupted by a band of horde players or a single night elf rogue who thrives on ganking lobbies. I personally prefer to play on a PvE or RP server, but the faction strain remains. With new changes that have already been put in place and additional changes coming, Blizzard is putting some power in your hands on how you view the relationship of the 2 factions. By using a pre-made group, Horde and Alliance players can join forces to tackle things like mythic dungeons, raids, and raided arenas, among other things. You can also create cross-faction communities as well as trade goods and gold with your past enemy. It's completely up to you. I've touched on this before, but while many parts of the questing journey in FF14 will be played alone, there's much more you can do with your free company than with a guild in Warcraft. I mean, the free company house alone is a huge feature. Party sizes and factions are going to be a personal preference thing. I for one like the factions in Warcraft because as a Horde player, while I have worked with the Alliance from time to time, they are still my sworn enemy. PvP is huge when it comes to gameplay variety. Warcraft has a lot of options when you thirst for the blood of other players. If you're on a PvP server or have war mode enabled, you can go out in the world and start impromptu battles, or you can queue for a number of battle types. Keep in mind you can equip 3 PvP talents from your talent tree page. Standard battlegrounds are 10v10 and contain several maps and game types. If you want something larger, epic battlegrounds are massive 40v40 game modes. Want something smaller? Arena skirmishes are 2 or 3 player teams, and solo shuffles are 6 total players in 3v3 matches that shuffle after each round. If you want something a little quirky, Cooking Impossible has you gathering ingredients to see who can cook their meal first. If you're more competitive, there's several options for raided arenas and battlegrounds of various team sizes. In FF14, there's also several options when you want to walk over the bodies of your slain enemies. Just try not to step on your friends. Crystalline Conflict can be run in casual, ranked, and custom modes. In casual and ranked, it's a solo queued 5v5 battle. In the custom versions, you can queue with a team of 5. Now, Frontlines are where I run around like a chicken on fire because the format can be a bit chaotic and hard to communicate and organize. Frontlines are a selection of 4 maps that cycle with one available daily, and they're made up of 3 24-player teams, and teams battle each other while claiming territories and retrieving data. It gets pretty interesting with Rival Wings. It plays a lot like a MOBA where 2 teams of 24 battle in 3 lanes to destroy each other's towers. Arguably, Warcraft has a much larger PvP scene and larger selection as it's a core part of the game, but Final Fantasy does add some interesting flavor with Rival Wings if you don't mind the long queue time. There's a number of options when it comes to daily activities in either game depending on your priorities. Daily goals will change every expansion, but in Warcraft there's a few things you may want to do. You can complete a daily heroic dungeon for increased rewards. For the current expansion, you can go to Korthia and Zareth Mortis and complete daily quests while working to complete their weekly quests. Doing these things will also work on reputation gained with a few groups and open up rewards. You can also complete a Mythic Plus dungeon to work towards your 4 weekly Mythics to get rewards from the Great Vault. You could also make your way to the Maw and venture into Torghast for rewards we talked about before. In Final Fantasy, you could start with Beast Tribe quests to work towards unlocking rewards. Head over to the Gold Saucer to get credit for your 3 Cactpot Scratchers. You can also go on a hunt for your Grand Company and track down specific monsters. Use the Daily Roulette to queue for an expert or level 90 dungeon. If you're down for some previous content, you could run the infamous main scenario, but don't even think about dying. Or you could run an Alliance raid or a daily leveling dungeon. I don't take advantage of dailies in either game as much as I should, but one thing is pretty clear. Final Fantasy has a larger list of daily activities, especially using old content, which takes us to our next section. In FF14, you can run all the previous things I mentioned and more. Another big item is Fates, which are events all over the world map that have you level sync, then earn solid rewards by completing tasks, killing monsters, or taking down a single boss. In Warcraft, old zones are not used as often outside of leveling alts. They are typically used during events for new expansions, like during pre-patches where there will be invasions in specific old zones. There's also a cycling selection of time-walking events where old dungeons become relevant from an expansion at a time, but they're not always available. One big difference between the 2 games in this area is the level sync effect. In Warcraft, unlike the previously mentioned party sync, when you are time-walking from an old dungeon, you level sync and keep all your abilities, but your power and gear are adjusted to match the level of the dungeon. In FF14, when you level sync, your powers match that of the powers you had at that level, so combat can be a little awkward, similar to party sync in Warcraft. So overall, FF14 seems to utilize more old content, but some really old content can be a bit boring given you only have a few abilities to use. For several expansions, there's been a table for follower missions in Warcraft. You can unlock new followers and level them up. Each follower will have a role and specific abilities as you try to counter the enemy's abilities. As you increase your followers' levels, the difficulty of missions will go up and the rewards will get better and better. Rewards can include reputation tokens, transmogs, mounts, anima, gold, and more. In FF14, I could see the related feature being retainer missions. After unlocking your first retainer, you'll need to obtain venture tokens to send them on missions. You can pick a job for your retainer as long as you've already learned it yourself, like mining, and equip them with the appropriate gear, including using your old job gear. The longer the mission you send them on, the better rewards you can get. Rewards can include job-appropriate items like ore for mining, or by running quick explorations can reward furniture, endgame gear, minions, and more. I know I've said this about other things now, but between the two, FF14's version can be a bit more involved, but is very rewarding. While Final Fantasy makes way more use of old content, the rest is a bit of a toss-up. Zareth Mortis in Warcraft is an amazing zone with so much to do each day, but FF14 definitely has more options to choose from with daily rewards. The game's communities are an interesting topic. Both games have specific reputations. Warcraft is known for being the most toxic place in the world, while FF14 is known for being inhabited exclusively with angels. Now the question is, are these statements accurate? You can't make people nice, but you can punish the toxic ones. I know it's thought that the FF14 in-game community is never toxic by choice because they are such nice people. However, this is mainly because toxicity is punishable per the game's contract. This includes things like harassment, stalking, political and religious talk, and monster player killing, which is dragging a mob into another player to kill or obstruct gameplay. I've even seen forum posts of people receiving a penalty for cursing even though there's a profanity filter option built into the game. Now don't get me wrong, I think it's perfectly acceptable to have these things in place, but we have to acknowledge that people are not avoiding being toxic because they want to. They're being forced to, and again, that's fine as long as we see it for what it is. I've experienced a special brand of toxicity in game where I was running a dungeon with my wife and she accidentally pulled a group of mobs before the tank could run in. The tank immediately stopped moving forward and watched us die, repeatedly, as we ran back from spawn just to die again while trying to keep at least one person alive. Once we finally killed the mobs, the tank ran to the next group. That was ridiculously toxic and they knew what they were doing, but if reported, could probably just claim AFK. Another time, while my wife and I were out questing, we had pulled too many things and were clearly struggling. A couple max level players flew down and watched us struggle. Apparently they had nothing better to do and couldn't be bothered to get off their literal high horses to help out. The special brand of toxicity in FF14 seems to be a passive type where they just enjoy watching you die. To be fair, it's not their job to help out new players who are struggling, but it does show the kind of person they are, and that they need a new form of entertainment other than watching noobs die. The game's director had to release a post about abusive behavior in PvP because the taunting was getting so bad with people spamming nice job after killing someone or spamming good match while winning. But the game wasn't over yet, basically a premature GG. I'm sure plenty of us remember what happened to Asmongold when he started playing FF14. Many people didn't want him in their world, so they did everything they could to make it a miserable experience, like killing all the mobs so he couldn't complete quests and crowding his UI with giant mounts and following him all over. Luckily, action was taken on many of these players. Simply put, toxic people will be toxic, and when they are put in a world with restrictions, will find new ways to be toxic, and they're not stopping because they choose to. I'm not trying to just pick on FF14 here, but the truth is, Warcraft was never claiming to be something magnificent when it came to its player base. When the players themselves start to make claims about how angelic they are, people are going to take notice when they lose their glow. As for Warcraft, I'll acknowledge that I've seen plenty of toxicity in the past. There's no getting around that, but they recently implemented a similar social contract and I've definitely seen a difference. I've noticed a massive drop in toxicity in trade chat, which is well known for being a hub for it. How effective it is in the future remains to be seen. I honestly think putting people's feet to the fire a bit is a good thing for a game. Both games. You don't have to be nice, just don't be a jerk. Or else. Now I want to acknowledge the good I've experienced in both games, especially in FF14 where there's a lot of wonderful people that don't have to be that way, from handing out crafted sweaters for free during Christmas, giving away rewards received from FETs, to simply watching and clapping for performing bands. In Warcraft, while recording gathering footage for this video series, I came across an Alliance player that was in over their head with elite mobs and running away. They had just ice block, but that did not sway the monsters as they just continued to slice at the block of ice. Being the hero I am, I rushed down to help out the undergeared Alliance player. Once the monsters lay still, nothing was said except for a sent hug and a received blown kiss, and we went on our way. My point with that story is that while the game's format is set so that Horde and Alliance players are enemies, we're all just people, trying to enjoy a game, and we should be good to each other. Overall, it's clear that a social contract is ideal for a more peaceful environment in a good MMO. Now, the effectiveness of this contract ends after leaving the games. There's plenty of toxicity from both games online because people can say whatever they want on the internet. That's where the Asmongold attack started and was organized. Just hang out on either game's Reddits for a bit and you'll find plenty of examples. Some of this will sound like recap, but there are many factors that play into Intuitiveness. Simply paying for the game is much easier in Warcraft as it can be done through the launcher, but many people have run into issues paying Square Enix to play the game. I'm honestly not sure why they haven't updated this process by now. When trying to get around the world, FF14 has a confusing map that without the knowledge of every zone gets a little difficult to navigate. I often have to ask others where something is or use my teleportation list to find places, then go back to the map to look. Warcraft has an extremely easy to use left-click in, right-click out method to their map, and it's easy to find zones since they are clearly separated by expansion. Crafting is another area where FF14 makes things more interesting while simultaneously making it unnecessarily difficult. There's a lot of powers to learn about and get synced just right to get the right result. High quality items feel less like a bonus and more like the only goal, where everything else is failing. And talking about failing, FF14 is the only one that offers the ability to fail. Warcraft's profession process is very approachable and easy to learn and does not punish you with failure. There's also many areas of FF14 that require you to find and run quests in order to unlock a core feature of the game, and they're not super obvious. We had friends telling us where these quests were, but new players may not have this type of support. This includes things like the barbershop, glamoring, and opening up the gold saucer, which requires completion of an envoy quest before the gold saucer quest will appear in another city without telling you. These are all optional features but huge parts of the game in my opinion, and they are awkward to unlock. When it comes to combat, FF14 has combos that lead to specific use of powers that have to be toggled back and forth, specifically talking about the Reaper on this one. Either way, it all comes back to combos, and there's lots to learn in order to play your class correctly. Warcraft, on the other hand, has much more freedom in combat and is more accessible for my kids to play. As I mentioned in Clarity of Questing in Part 4, my wife and I were questing and got stuck at level 80, unable to continue with the next quest. The manager of Suites had suggestions for unlocking this quest, but nowhere in the game was it clear as to what needed to be done. After leaving the game and eventually coming back, the internet and friends helped us figure out what we had to do in order to continue the story. In Warcraft, if you're not sure where to go for the next quest, just head to the next town or zone and go on from there, since there's no restrictions on leveling, which makes it much easier to approach. Another area is pet battles. There's so many options with pet battles, and yet they're all easy to do in Warcraft. You can jump right in and learn quickly, whereas in FF14 the only use of minions outside of having them follow you is a Lord of Verminion, which has so many instructions and gets confusing fast. The one area I would lean the other way is probably mechanics. Although it's not my favorite style, the consistent orange circles and arrows makes going into a new encounter much easier without the need for additional add-ons since it's built in. Although I will say that since running Alliance raids, just watching for the markers isn't enough. Without knowing the fight or where to go or having someone guide you, which we had, you will often die with one wrong move. The fights can be very unforgiving. Overall, I firmly believe Warcraft to be a much more intuitive game than FF14. My daughter is pretty young but has leveled up several characters, and I only get the occasional questions about talents, but with the new talent system, that's solved by using the default talent tree. On the topic of children, when it comes to your children joining you in-game, what does each game offer to make for a safe environment, and what makes things worse? Both games offer a profanity filter to help keep chat a little cleaner. While ERP exists in most games to a degree, one game takes it much further. Final Fantasy has clubs that they say are 18 plus, but who is enforcing the age requirement? Who is stopping a lying 13-year-old from going into these online brothels and interacting with an adult? Yes, I acknowledge that there are way worse places on the internet for a 13-year-old, but why is this in a video game designed for players 13 and older? Players go into these clubs and offer in-game currency for services. I'm all for RP and immersion, but this feels like too much for a game with this age rating. With that said, I let my children play World of Warcraft, but I do not let them play Final Fantasy XIV. Going all the way back to my clickbait title, is WoW better than FF14? Honestly, who can say? I can only speak for my own preferences in a game. No one gets to definitively say which game reigns supreme. I do have a lot of opinions and preferences, and I think I aired them all out here in these videos, but I'll touch on the main points again. I think the design styles outside the game and in are more polished in Warcraft. The character customization is so much better in FF14. Based on my gaming style, I believe Warcraft has a stronger approach to character identity by making each character's journey unique. Both games look great, but the maps are way better in Warcraft, both in looks and usage. Both games have some duds when it comes to zones, but generally have amazing looking areas to quest through. The music approach is different, and I think the music overall fits the tone of Warcraft better, but I actually prefer the music in Final Fantasy. Unlocking flying in FF14 is easier and can be done sooner, but I prefer the ability to fly over mountains from zone to zone more in Warcraft. The freedom of movement in WoW is massive for me when it comes to overall gameplay. It's not even close. Warcraft has more pets along with more to do with them and actually having toys, but FF14 comes back with more emotes and dances. Both are pretty awesome in that regard. Housing is huge in a modern game, and FF14 does not disappoint with their system as long as you can win the housing lottery. The Gold Saucer sits above all else when it comes to leisure activities. Both games have a ton of things to unlock, and I will never get them all in either one. When it comes to gathering and crafting, I prefer the straightforward approach in Warcraft. The auction house in WoW is also straightforward and easier to navigate versus the market board in FF14. When it comes to mechanics, I'd have to go with WoW. FF14 does have a solid mechanic system built into the game, but in most cases, without prior knowledge of the fight or warning from a friend, those warnings are typically too short and you die before you realize what's going on. Also, the delay between the indicator disappearing and the ability happening gets weird since you can feel like you dodged the ability, but you still get hit after being 5 feet away. Those that have played it know what I'm talking about. Also, when it comes to dungeons and solo duties, I'm not a fan of being forced into things, which is what the MSQ does in Final Fantasy. There were several times that had my wife in tears, and not because the story was so touching, but because she was overwhelmed by the process. For those that remember each duty, it was mainly the one where you fight as Thancred, and the one where you fight Xenos, but there were others. Warcraft also has the ability to customize your abilities with talents and trinkets, which is huge when it comes to making your character feel unique and your own. I definitely prefer the leveling experience of Warcraft since I can approach it however I want and I'm not forced into situations where I have to disband the party and run solo content. I do like the achievements and the associated rewards that come with a Warcraft guild, but overall I prefer the free company experience since there's more actions to unlock and the free company housing, if you're lucky enough to have it, is pretty fantastic. The last thing would be PvP, which I don't think is even close. There's so many options in Warcraft, from open world PvP and city raids to arenas and epic battlegrounds. All I can say there is for the Horde. Overall, I would say I obviously prefer more aspects of World of Warcraft, but that doesn't mean I don't enjoy logging into Final Fantasy and running around the Gold Saucer or completely failing at a frontline. I would highly recommend trying out both and seeing what works best for you. Don't just take my word for it or anyone else's without trying them for yourself. My primary intention for making this video was after seeing so many videos about WoW refugees, how terrible Warcraft is now, and how Final Fantasy is heaven for those that seek it. It all just seems so one-sided, so I thought I'd compare them for myself. Hopefully I made very few mistakes as I did my best to be as honest and researched as I could. I haven't played all aspects of either game and I actually learned some cool new things. I hope you enjoyed these videos and please keep things civil in the comments. I plan to start streaming soon if I haven't already before this is posted, and the details can be found below. I also have some additional content planned including Dragonflight, Final Fantasy, Overwatch, and even Minecraft. Let me know if there's something specific you'd like me to try playing or review. With all that said, I hope to see you in the Orgrimmar Auction House in World of Warcraft or at the Gold Saucer in Eorzea. See you next time, guys. Okay, bye.